Hi, Helio.
Hello, how are you? It's kind of who's there? You need to get close to the camera because otherwise they don't see you.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, Devin, how's it going? Man? I can't believe you're there today. And I'm not. Oh man, I can't believe it.
It's not meant to be.
Oh man. So is the junior dev meetup every last Thursday?
It depends. I think I do it every. I mean, this one they won't meet. They will one next one, I guess. Next one or the following one. So yeah. Yeah, you got some.
Okay.
So it depends. Oh.
The last few of them, I mean, this was awesome. I really wanted to do it, but I noticed like a day after.
It's recorded if you want. So
Oh,
I don't post it. So I don't post it immediately. I will take some time to post it up. So.
yeah, no, I would these days, man. Summer is coming. There's too many holidays.
Can you say something and then is there still echo? Because I turned on echo
All right,
cancellation.
let me see. Now I think the echo is gone. What do you turn off?
Echo cancellation. I turned it on.
Perfect,
Apparently it was off.
perfect, man. That's just
But how's
amazing.
how's the audio quality?
For me, looks good.
Okay,
For
looks good.
for me over here, everything is good.
So I won't be able to see the comments. So I guess I'll have to rely on you to like mention if someone's commenting or someone's watching and then they're commenting.
Oh man, I'm okay. All right, I'll try my best to do that because I'm usually not good at that. But anyway, I'll try to keep tabs on it.
Yeah. Sorry, because I'm using the laptop connected directly to the projector. So I need to maximize the whole thing.
You can tell me that you're using your Linux. You can tell me that's okay. This is a safe space.
Yeah.
All right. How are you guys there? You want to get started? And you all excited for some war stories and Ruby on Rails upgrade tales? The tale of the tape.
Helio, why are you at home? Why didn't you come here?
Man, I'm getting sick by the minute, and in the middle of the afternoon, I closed my laptop and I lay in bed and I slept for like 2 hours. So I'm getting really sick. I was not going to be able to drive to see you guys, and I'm so sad that I'm not there today. So next time.
Nice piano, by the way.
Thank you. It's
You should
brought
have the
you.
meetup next time.
I think it's brought to you by Zoom or something like that. It's not. It's just a rental furniture, a rental background screen. All right,
Okay.
guys, you all ready to get started?
Yeah.
All right, everybody. Thank you all for coming. Those of you in person and those of you like me online. And we are here today. We are gathered here today for Ruby Tuesday 108. All right. This event is brought to you by Ruby Brigade and Engineers My. You can find us on all these links, GitHub, everywhere. Meetup, Facebook, GitHub, Slack, Discord, and we are more active on Slack. At least I am, but you can find us in many different places. Today, Venus Food Drinks are sponsored by our friends at Shortcut Asia, formerly Suya Labs. We turn your ideas into reality. Thank you all from Amen and everybody from Shortcut Asia for having us. You have no idea how sad I am to not be there with you guys today. I had really high hopes to do a ping pong or table tennis tournament, and man, I'm sad. But here we are. Let's go. Remember to introduce yourself. My name is Helio, and I'm one of the co-organizers of Ruby Malaysia Meetup. And Tristan, do you want to say a word and introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. I'm Tristan. I help Helio organize the meetups. He's supposed to be here, but he's sick today, so I'm the one who set things up. Yeah.
And just one last disclaimer: if my head falls down here in the laptop, my wife might hear and she's gonna come to help me. So you guys don't need to worry too much. All right, for the folks online, remember that your profile name, your profile picture, and your comment may show up on the stream, so act accordingly. And we abide by the Ruby community, the Ruby language code of conduct. Remember to treat each other nicely and with respect. And today we managed to get only one speaker, and I'm gonna be talking to you guys about dev staging CI prod disparity. All right, let me share my screen now. Let me switch here to my presentation. Where is my dev CI prod staging? All right. Is it there? Tristan, I think do you need to put on the stage?
Yeah, I have to put it on stage.
Okay, sorry about that. All right. Here we go, ladies and gentlemen. Dev staging CI prod disparity. Like I said, my name is Helio. I've been working with software development for about 23 years. And I do primarily Ruby on Rails for 13 years. Those are the links where you can find me in the internet. And here's the agenda of my talk. I'm gonna tell a little bit about what it is dev prod parity. You all know about these, and I'm not gonna spend too much time on it. A short tale or two. That's kind of my specialty, to tell stories of the past. And I'll talk a little bit about Rails Cache Store, Rails Env, Letter Opener Gem. I think all these things we've heard before, and beyond. So what is the definition of dev prod parity, right? I think it's the idea of having the same underlying infrastructure, configured the same way as production. So the behavior that you see in your development machine, in your staging environment, on your QA environment, is a prediction for production. These are just some things that I came up with as I was writing my last blog post, and that kind of gives me an overview. So if you run your software in your dev machine and behaves a certain way, dev prod parity is going to increase your odds of that behavior to be in production. So if it works on your machine, if it works on our machine, it should work for our users, and it should work for our QA engineers, and so on and so forth, right? So the closest your development and staging environment are to production, the better. So if they were exactly the same, then if it works in your machine, it's going to always work in production. But we know that that's not always the case, right? So let me tell you a story, a tale. So let me see here. I think I'm a little bit lost. Okay, what I prepared here. I think this slide's a little bit out of order. So, but anyway, let's look into this one, right? a common scenario that we experience, right? When was the last time you heard one of your teammates said, "Hey, it works on my machine," right? Uh, so it works on my machine, but the new features uses a new background key. And in your development environment, you run everything synchronously. We just don't want to run everything on, going to run Sidekick, Redis, and everything else on our development environment. You just make the job run asynchronous. It doesn't perform async. Or if performs async, we kind of put a gem in there that makes that async to behave as perform now in development environment, right? So sometimes this happens, and but guess what? Production, it is going to run asynchronously, and the queue is not configured. So you develop this feature, it works on your machine, and you put it in production, it breaks. And why does it break? In this particular scenario that I'm talking about is because the queue is not configured. There is no workers configured to execute the queue. And then it works on your machine, it doesn't work in production. So another scenario of work on your machine, right? I have a feature that's caching Z, and the caching of this particular feature, the particular view, will speed up the view and will improve the user experience. That's the feature that I'm working, right? I'm adding cache to speed up and to improve the user experience. And in dev, we don't cache anything. In our local machine, everything's fast, right? Our database is small, our machines are very powerful, expensive. So maybe we don't do caching in our local machine. That's not necessary. But I'm still building a caching feature. So in dev, also, we always test with a test user. In the best case scenario, you and your machine, you have 2 or 3 test users that exemplify one or another use case. You have a root account, you have a user account, you have an admin account. Maybe you're that organized in your local environment, but you're still going to test only one user. So in production, what's going to happen in production? In production, the cache key that you're using, it's using the wrong attribute. So it's caching data for a given user or for a given story or for a given blog post. And in your machine, it works because that cache key doesn't make much of a difference. But guess what happened in production? You put it in production and your cache key is not going to match. So you go to blog post A, B, C, D, and E, and all of them show the same blog A. So those are examples of product disparity, because what you have on your machine is different from production. You're not developing, you're not testing. So you roll back these features, right? Or you have feature flags. There is a whole reason why there is SaaS companies only building feature flag engines. So you can put all these things, you can develop a bunch of stuff behind your feature flag, and then if it's broken because of some kind of production dev product disparity, you disable your feature, and then you go back to development. So moving on. Remember some folks that sometimes they say things like that. When I test in production, or I test on CI, right? Sometimes there are good reasons to test in production. Sometimes that's the only reason. The only strategy that you have is to test in production. But there are also those times where everything works on your machine, everything works on staging. So testing there is not relevant. So you need to test in production. So the new feature that you built is broken in production, and for sure we now put everything behind the feature flag, or we have rollback procedures. Our rollback procedures are mature. I can deploy stuff and roll back easily. And not sure if this is visible to users. Maybe some users are going to catch that. Some others don't. But it all matters about, the only thing that matters is the users that complain or send support tickets. But anyway, moving on. Let me tell you another story. I want to know if you guys have seen this before, right? I think we've all seen in the past, right? Works on my machine. I test in production. I think all these things we've heard before, right? At least I did. But this one here is new to me. And remember, I work with software development for like 20 something years and 13 years with Ruby on Rails. And this one was new to me and it was recent. It was, I still remember. So it works on my machine. CI is green. And by the way, test coverage on this application is like 87%, so it's quite high. Your test suite tests covers a lot of your application. Works on staging, and by the way, this is a Heroku, an app on Heroku. And regression tests are always expected, like manual regression tests by a QA engineer or someone that are used to test some of these things. But it breaks in production. The feeling that, when we get green CI, like, man, everything is good, right? And then after green CI, it works on staging, everybody done a lot of testing, and man, we are solid. This thing is going to work in production. We've done all due diligence. We have everything. We have like 87% test coverage. We've done so much stuff. And there is the time for deploying to production, bam, it breaks, right? So that's an interesting feeling. And I don't know how many of you remember the last situation you've been in that position. But this talk is primarily motivated by a situation like this that I've been through not too long ago. So this is a tale of a Rails 7 upgrade, and this is the motivation for this talk, and also for my latest blog post. So this is a 9.5-old Rails application. This is like 9.5. This Rails application was created, Rails new 9.5 years ago, almost 10 years ago. And all these things happened with me when we're migrating from 6.1 to 7. And oh my goodness, my slide here is a little bit out of order. But anyway, so let me talk a little bit about now what happens with these Rails upgrading, how a series of production disparities caused all these problems. So let me ask you a question. I'm going to ask you now, the next slides, I'm going to ask you a couple questions, whether you think this is parity or disparity, right? So is using cache store, new store in dev, stage, and CI, and using Redis cache store in production, is parity or disparity? Raise your hand if you think disparity.
Who says disparity? Raise your hand. Who's not sure? Raise your hand. Not sure. Okay.
So just to give you some visuals, imagine like this, right? Development RB and test RB uses new store. Production uses Redis store if there is a Redis URL available. In staging, it doesn't even comment it out. So obviously here is an easy question. This is not parity, this is disparity. And one interesting aspect is that a lot of apps that uses Sidekick and uses Redis, we all have Redis across the board. For this particular app, we had Redis in the development, the bin setup, install Redis. It was very well organized, the setup of the code. So Redis was there, is in the proc file, staging has Redis, CI has Redis, production has Redis. But the configuration of the Rails app, they're all over the place. They're all completely different. And obviously, these, if you're doing, depending on how you're doing Rails 6.1 to Rails 7 upgrade, this is going to bite you. and this is going to cause you some trouble. All right. Has anybody noticed this difference? Red's store versus Red's cash store in this slide. So here is something that sometimes it goes by your eye. Red's store, it's not equal to Red's cash store. So the difference between these two is Red's store is like a former Red's Rail Jam, which the last commit was 2 years ago. And Rails has incorporated this feature, and it's stored now. It calls the name of this store Red's Cache Store. So if you, in the process of upgrading to Rails 7, if you set load defaults, Rails config load defaults to 6.0 or above, this is not going to work, because starting on Rails 6.0, I don't remember if 6.0 or 6.1, I think it's 6.0. If you're using the Red's Rails Jam, you're going to get a nasty error message. And guess what? If you only use cache store in production, you're only going to see that error message when you deploy to production. So these all started with the product disparity, where only production uses cache store. Everybody else, like I was showing this slide, right? All the other environments, they use either new store or it's commented out. Only production use red store. So it works on my machine, it works on staging, CI is green, and guess what? It doesn't even deploy in production. Anyway, it's good because the error message is very nice. The error message is very telling and very explaining, and it provides you a way out of it, so you don't need to go back to the drawing board. But anyway, it's we found the disparity between environments, we fix them, and we move on to the next. So here's another scenario. Rails env staging on QA and staging environments, and Rails env production on production. Is this parity or disparity? This is the good.
Yeah.
Who first raise your hand if you think this is parity?
Parity.
Using Rails env staging in QA in staging and Rails env production in production. Parity. Raise your hand if you think this is parity.
Raise your hand if it's parity.
Raise your hand. Okay, now raise your hand if it's disparity. Twister, help me count there. What's the count?
Parity? No? Okay. Disparity. Okay. Okay.
So I guess it depends, right? Is config.staging RB is the same as config.production RB? If they're the same, then maybe it's close to parity. If they're not the same, like in the example that I showed earlier, it's a disparity. And on Heroku, another question here before I get into Heroku. Now let me phrase this question this way. What if I tell you that we use development environment on dev CI, QA, and staging and production in production? Does it still look parity to you or disparity?
So the only difference is from staging, it's now development.
Yeah. But then the mechanic will see all the console, everything.
Yeah.
Like error console.
I guess it's the same issue, right? Like, I guess the staging was closer to production.
Yeah, so development is always a lot loose than everything, right? So we have a lot of crazy stuff in development. We put bullet jam, we put some other stuff. We make bullet jam to put some stuff in our view so we can find those n+1 queries and not be hidden in the logs. So the closer you got to using what you have in development to production, the farther you are making these two environments to look like. But anyway, Rails env staging. So since way back in the day, Heroku throws this warning message. If you use Rails env not production, it's like you are deploying a non-production environment staging. This is not recommended. See this article for more information. I used Heroku for something like 10 years. And I remember seeing these deploying to a custom Rails environment for a long time. These links, I don't know if there is anybody in there that use Heroku like really early in the days. Do you remember that the gem that we had to put in the production environment for Heroku? Something like, who remember that?
No.
It's like 12 factor something. There's some shenanigans in Heroku logs that are going to put a gem in that. So this article still mentions that. So these articles like for way back in the day. But if you look at this article today, it was updated a couple months ago. But anyway, if in Heroku, if you use an environment that's not production, they will spit this warning at you, and they will try to kind of blame you for any problems in that environment because you don't have parity. This article is an interesting read, but it does feel like it's a little outdated. Like Heroku, these articles have been around for, I don't know, more than a decade. So there is stuff there that was written 10 years ago. All right, moving on. Letter opener gem.
Helio, I have a question on that because one of the things that Heroku pushed forward was the 12 factor, like you mentioned, right? 12 factor, and
Yeah.
one of the main pillars there is to use environment variables. So if you have parity in terms of infrastructure, you're just changing configuration. So for example, if it doesn't matter if you're running staging or production, it's going to be the same programs like Redis, Postgres, whatever. Your app is there, but you're only changing like, okay, the API keys, the tokens, or like the URLs of certain things. So how does that, is that parity or disparity in this case?
I guess it depends, right? It depends on how your Rails app is. That's why when in my first slide, let me go back there because I think this is like, I felt like this was an interesting view about dev prod parity, right? So you have to have the same underlying infrastructure. So, and it has to be configured the same way. So even if
it doesn't mean that you're using the same
even if I have an Ubuntu desktop, my Ubuntu desktop might be configured completely different than the Ubuntu 22s on Heroku. So the environment variables, they are a step towards parity, but it still depends on how your app is configured. You may have the environment variables exactly the same or exactly like in sync with from your development environment, your Heroku environment, but your development RB, you're not using Redis for cache store. You're using new store.
Yeah, but it doesn't mean that you need to use the same database as production, right? Like you're running CI and then you're running it on the production database. So it doesn't need to be like that for super full parity.
So that's I was thinking of putting this scenario here. You develop your machine with SQLite. SQLite has been hot nowadays. A lot of people is talking about it. There was a conference talking, I think in Taiwan, the RubyConf Taiwan, about SQLite, and it was like running SQLite in production. So honestly, I think that's a big warning flag. to me is disparities, crystal clear disparity. If you have SQLite in your local machine and you run Postgres on staging production. I don't trust Active Record that much to be a common interface and behaves exactly the same with two completely different database engines. I don't trust Active Record that much. But anyway, if you go into that Heroku, if you go into this Heroku article, they mention about these very politely all the way to the bottom of the article about exactly that, about databases in Heroku and databases in your local machine. I have not drank the SQLite Kool-Aid yet, so I still run Postgres on my local machine for my development environment, and I keep my fingers crossed I don't start working on an application that uses MySQL, because I do not want to install another database on my machine. Does that kind of answer your question? You have any follow-up thoughts there?
No? Anyone? Any other questions before he goes to letter opener? No.
All right, moving on. Letter opener jam. Raise your hand if you use letter opener jam. If I had more than two hands, I would hit three of them, all three. So I guess letter opener jam is safe, right? So this is a big disparity, right? So sending emails out, right? So if you don't send your email out on a local machine, it's different. It's a big disparity between production, right? Is it safe, or we should say is acceptable given the difficulties of setting up mail settings for all developers' local machine? So do we accept these as safe? Do we say it's safe, or do we accept it? Or it's acceptable because X, Y, Z, A, B, C. So why is it okay to use letter opener jam on our machines? And if you're using letter opener jam and you're not using mailer HTML preview on the browser, man, you're losing a lot. This is something that came to Rails not too long ago. I remember working Rails applications where that mail preview was not. So maybe this is Rails 6, 6.1, or no, I don't think it's 7. Maybe Rails 6, maybe dates back to Rails 5. But I started doing Rails with Rails 2, so way before this. And this is absolutely an awesome feature. So if you're building that email, you need to change the wording of the reset password, or the confirmation email wording, or you need to translate. Now I need to support French or German in those emails. Having these HTML in the browser is like so simple, so fast for you to build those features. As a developer, their productivity, it pays out at big time. It's really handy. So we accept for a dozen reasons. But there was a time where I had documented in the README all the settings, all the development API keys. So if you're doing some email, you should test it. I'm also old enough that I remember people complaining that they wrote an HTML email and yahoo.com doesn't load that HTML. So back in the day, there was a lot of trouble making your HTML email render in all web emails and all mail clients. If you speak to someone old that has been doing software for a long time, most likely they heard someone complaining about it. I did, maybe at least 2 times. I had close teammates or known people that was cursing having to write HTML emails and, oh my gosh, the Gmail doesn't render these pixel tracking. I was like, oh, I don't know, Yahoo.com, AOL.com doesn't handle these. Like Microsoft Outlook Express does not handle that HTML. So back in the day, this was like a big pain point. Nowadays, whatever, if it renders on my browser, PR is good to go, right? So it works on the browser on my machine, and hopefully I test on Firefox, Chrome, Safari. But if that mail HTML preview my browser, man, I don't feel like I'm gonna do anything else. But anyway, we accept that and we move on, or not, or we do some other stuff, right? And beyond, right? What comes beyond? This is an example that I feel like I'm suffering from these with another regular application. Does your background jobs run synchronously on your dev machine and Sidekick in production? I started working in another application not too long ago, a Rails application, and I'm suspecting that there is a place in there that this is happening, but I haven't been able to figure out yet or to dig into that yet. And I was like, man, I don't feel like you should in your development machine you should run your background job synchronously. You should run it asynchronously. You should go into the effort of putting Redis and Sidekick on your machine and running that. Nowadays, having Redis on your machine and run Sidekick in a terminal shell, it's fine, it's easy, it's not a lot of effort. But anyway, that's a production disparity. Is your dev machine operational system the same as production? This is just a guiding question. I'm not gonna make a poll. I'm not gonna ask you all which dev machine. I know this is a hot topic, and it's okay if you use Mac. It's okay if you use Linux. It's okay if you use Windows, regardless of recall or not. With
Oh, we
Linux,
should get a poll. We should get a poll. Who uses Windows?
it's
No?
it's okay if you use Windows with Linux subsystem. I use OS X with a Linux subsystem, so it's kind of the same. But anyway, if you develop, that's a common disparity, right? If you develop on Debian, or if you develop on a really low-level Linux distribution and you deploy on Heroku, on Ubuntu, there is a good amount of differences between those Linux distributions that can put in trouble. Another question that I don't want you guys to answer is just guiding, just food for thoughts. Do you develop on Docker and you deploy on Heroku EC2? Is your local Docker environment that you run nicely on Docker Compose the same as production? We are not going to talk about Docker. I'm not a fan of Docker. I don't like to critique Docker either, but I'm not a heavy Docker user. So let's not just talk about. But anyway, this is another thing. Like one of the things Docker helps you, it's with parity, right? It's a lot easier for you to set up a more complex environment in your local machine that's comparable to production. But do you make some shortcuts in your local Docker environment that you don't make in production, that you don't do in production? Because those are the places where you're going to introduce disparity, and then that can come back and bite you. And do you know which OpenSSL you run in your machine? I don't. And I have a cheat sheet to install Ruby because my Mac has some weird, Apple has some weird OpenSSL issues that's incompatible to Ruby, so I cannot just run a VM install Ruby. I need to do a bunch of other stuff. I need to set a custom OpenSSL prefix. But if you're doing some really low-level cryptography in your code, if you run different versions of OpenSSL in your local machine in production, then you're there is a disparity there that can cause you some trouble. Do you use Jamalloc on production? Raise your hand if you're using Jamalloc on production.
What's Jamalloc?
Is anybody using Jamalloc in production?
What's
I need to raise only one hand because I have some apps that uses Jamalloc and some other apps that don't use it.
Yeah, but what does it do?
So Jamalloc is just a memory allocation, a different memory allocation library, which is not the default that comes with the Ruby VM. And there is a lot of discussions, and sometimes you see people barking that like, I can't believe Ruby still doesn't use Jamalloc as the default. So Jamalloc helps your memory management. You save, I don't know, in some cases you save like 30% memory on your dyno, on your Ruby VM, just by using Jamalloc instead of the default version, the default memory management library that Ruby comes with. But anyway, if you use Jamalloc in production and you don't use that in your development environment, anyway, we don't need to talk about memory leaks here and not go to this level, but it's another example of disparity that sometimes we accept, sometimes we don't. Sometimes they come back to bite us, sometimes they don't. So you just need to pick the ones that you want to fight, and you want to pick the ones that you call it disparity, and then forget about the others. Maybe document or something. But still, Rails 7 is in production. 7.0 is in production. Every single thing is working. Every single feature is working. But there is still one issue that it was only broken in production. This was a really interesting Rails 7.0 upgrade that I did. And that is one of those issues that broke in production. I could not replicate on staging. And maybe it was because staging was using Rails environment staging instead of production, but production was fine. If production is working, it's kind of hard to justify spending more time chasing down the last issue. And while everything, staging was fine, right? So everything works in staging, but it's broken in production. And this is it, folks. That's kind of what I wanted to talk to you guys today. If you have any question or comments, and important that does not include Docker, Kamau, or Capstrano, I'll be more than happy to try to answer. Any question?
Anyone have questions?
Who?
Key lessons learned. Oh, sorry, you have. Anona says key lessons learned for you.
So key lesson learned for me. Be aware of Rails load defaults. So part of Rails upgrade now, you need to upgrade Rails to a later environment, but you also need to set load defaults either to the version before or to the version that you're migrating Rails to. In this particular case, Rails load default that I'm talking about, Rails load default was like 5.0, way below the Rails version. And that also caused some of the problems. Some of the problems was caused by Rails load default. So just be careful. If you follow the Rails upgrade guidelines closely, be careful next time they tell you to set load defaults to a higher version. Another thing is make sure you have Redis everywhere in your environment. It costs you absolutely nothing to have Redis on your CI. And this was a small little thing that also caused problems. CI was using NuStore, and we had Redis there already configured because we were testing a bunch of Sidekick workers. So if you have a Redis everywhere and Sidekick everywhere, make sure your development environments use Redis cache store everywhere. I think these are the two main takeaways, main lessons learned. But also kind of keep in mind that we cannot chase all the production dev prod disparities. Some of them we just kind of need to forget and ignore and move on. So sometimes it's gonna come back and bite you, but most of the times won't. I will try to remember. I don't remember the last time ever that I run into such a weird experience and upgrading Rails. But anyway, my clock has reset a couple months ago.
And we have another question from you.
Do you use Jalan often, like in most of your projects?
Yes, I do. I do use Jamalloc in most of the projects. I heard something that recently, in the past, I don't know, 3 months, that I think there are some thoughts in the Ruby core team, and they will finally move to have Ruby default to Jamalloc. Right now, it is not. You need to temper your Docker file. You need to temper your Heroku settings. You need to do a bunch of settings. So you tell Ruby to use Jamalloc, and it saves like 30% of your memory usage. And there is one interesting scenario that I've been working with is that is a Heroku app using a PM Dyno, which is kind of quite expensive and has like ton of memory because it's kind of a little bit misconfigured. And I'm pretty sure that if we set Jamalloc, if we set Jamalloc, and if we change the configuration of web concurrency and max min threads on Puma, we'll be able to stay under the threshold memory limit from the 2x Dyno, which is like a fraction of the price. And this app is using our scaling, and you can scale a lot more for a lot less money. So on Heroku, there's some interesting auto scaling strategies. If your Heroku bill is like it's kind of around $1,000 a month or something like that, and that's where I think Jamalloc pays off big time and helps a lot.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions for Helio? No? Good.
All right. Thank you all for your time.
Sorry, Helio, we have another question.
You mentioned the pilot issue introduction. We hear about that.
Can you repeat for me, Tristan? I couldn't hear.
The microphone is there.
Yeah.
Just put it on your.
Okay. In the last slide, you mentioned there was one issue that you didn't solve. What was it?
So you can go read my blog post. I talk a lot more about the timeline and events, but in summary, Wicked PDF somewhere around Ruby gems, some gem got updated and they removed the require open struct. And then when I update the Rails, that require is gone. So, and without the require, because Wicked PDF was also relying on some other gem that was requiring that ungodliness open struct. So Wicked PDF was not allowing the app to load. It was like, you can't load the app because you can't find open struct under Wicked PDF namespace. But anyway, I think there's a PR that fixed the Wicked PDF that also now Wicked PDF requires itself if nobody else has done it. But interesting enough, the same version with Rails 7 in staging Heroku, everything loaded fine. So the auto loading was able to find open struct under the Ruby VM and not trying to find open struct under the Wicked PDF namespace. So staging works fine. And the feature, I tested the feature using Wicked PDF and it works. It renders the PDF and everything works. in production, the app doesn't even load. It's like, I cannot load this file, name error. Cannot find wicked PDF open struct. Obviously, open struct is not on wiki PDF, it's on Ruby VM. It's in the global namespace, not under Wikipedia. But anyway, that was an interesting one. It's like I was like itching my hand as you try to dive deep into that and spend, I don't know, weeks chasing that needle in the haystack. But I guess my boss didn't thought it was a good usage of my time. Unfortunately.
Okay. Any more questions from here? No.
All right.
Yeah. Mm.
Thank you so much, guys.
Obrigado, boa noite.
Yay.
All right. So let me switch back now to the presentation, and let me share my screen now here again. Let me go back to the deck. Oh, Jesus. No, not this one. There we go. I found it. Can you put on? Oh, there you go. Thank you, Tristan. So now I'm going to switch back to this tab. That's the talk. Parking lot. Now I'm going to have my friend Tristan take it over.
Yeah, sure. You might need to open some of the links. So I think Helio announced this yesterday, last month. It's still happening. And who else is going to Red Dot Ruby? Surya Labs is not going to Red Dot Ruby. Shortcut? No? Didn't you know? Yeah. You have to go, right? Yeah. Yay, yay. You there? Huh? What? Oh, yeah, you have to convince who's your boss now. Yeah, that you should sponsor everyone to go to Singapore. Yeah, that's so the Red Hot Ruby is coming there, and then next one is the Rails Developer Survey. So just go there, just go to railsdeveloper.com/survey, answer a few questions, make sure you're heard, so that the people from Rails know what to do next time. And the next one is something interesting. So I don't know if you've subscribed to Ruby Weekly. Do you mind opening this link, Helio? Just open it in a new tab. You should open it in a new tab, otherwise it will be gone. Yeah, yeah. This so just subscribe to this one. It's weekly news about things about Ruby. You just enter your email address. It's just rubyweekly.com. I just took a few interesting ones from this newsletter. So if you go back to the slide, the next one would be 3.3.2 is released, just in case you didn't know. It's just a few minor bug fixes. Next one is about SQLite. We were talking about SQLite, and did you know that have you heard about 37 Signals One's products? They were talking about like every service is now subscription based, and you have to pay monthly, etc. And then so they had this initiative called Once. So you pay once, and then you get the software plus support and whatever for the rest of it. That's what you pay for. That was how software was done in the old days, and they want to bring it back. And they were talking about SQLite because some like Campfire or some of their Once products are actually using SQLite in production. So they say sometimes you just don't need Postgres because you don't have a lot of traffic. So these products would be running internally on the LAN. A lot of products actually don't get deployed like towards the whole internet. Most of them just intranets, LANs, or like sometimes it's just a project for a few people, and you just need like an interface, right? So, and you don't need a full-blown Postgres for that, and then you can use SQLite, and that's what they're doing as well. And so that it's an interesting interview. Helio, how do they get to this? Maybe you can put the Ruby Tuesday slides later, right? Like the the GitHub link.
I will put that on the
So
slides, and I'll post these links on the Slack as well.
yeah, so like you can go through. So we have a GitHub page on GitHub, sorry, a GitHub repository with all of the past presentations all over the years. If you want to get the links of these specific ones, it will be there. But yeah, but it's an interesting interview, so you should take a look at it. The next one is something that I thought was interesting because I was looking at doing the same thing as well. If you open this, so this is the actual application. You don't have to read it right now, but can you open this in a new tab? This is an actual Rails application. It's just a single file. You can actually do that as a single. You can have a full-blown Rails application as a single file. So this blog post talks about how each of the components and how do you assemble them. So yeah, first of course the gem file. It needs to be the gem file needs to be part of this file, right? How do you do that as a part of a Ruby file, a Ruby program, so that it's not a separate gem file when you do a bundle? So yeah, the gem file, the action controllers, etc. And then how do you run it at the end so that you only run one Ruby file and then the whole Rails application boots up. So, and the next one is something that I was looking at when this crystallized gem came out. It's a way to do foreign function interface to the Crystal language, so that you can still write Ruby, but then you have like a particular text that delegates it to a Crystal process. So just in case, let's say you have a computation heavy module, then you can run it in Crystal instead of running it in Ruby. And this is what I was also thinking of, like trying to do a benchmark. And this guy actually fixed the Ruby implementation on the benchmark so that it actually runs faster than Crystal. So Helio, again, if you open the link, there's just like a few explanation here about at the end. Just scroll down towards the very end. Apparently, like running it with YJIT makes it faster than a proper compiled language like Crystal. And so there are ways to make your Ruby program even faster. One is like fixing some logic errors, and the other is like running YJIT. Maybe Gemalock might help as well. Yeah. Well, like these. So again, this probably won't be that much of a like improvement for many Rails applications, because many Rails applications are actually bottlenecked by I/O. But this is really specifically for like CPU intensive ones. So maybe like, yeah, no, this is really like computation intensive. Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Well,
Gemalock.
Well, it depends on that, because you need to push in like depending on how you allocate memory when you're like allocating the variables. Like if it's like depending on, and actually the way this was about like the access, because I think the original was through an array. If you scroll up, Helio, that he was talking about like.
Wow, this is interesting. Look, Ruby is 5 times faster than Crystal and 20 times faster the original version. That's the benchmark, right?
Scroll up a bit more. Like he was talking about like the original one was through an array. Again, like about the allocation might help. So it depends on how you push things as a parameter and how you take it out from that parameter. So it might be fully computation based, but still that computation needs to have like parameters, needs to work with data, right? And so that the optimization of data will still come into play when you're optimizing something. Yeah, that's it for the parking lot, I think.
All right. Okay.
You're posting the links, right?
Yeah, I'll post the links in a little bit on Slack as well. All right, this is all we had. Hope to see you all next month.
Hiring shoutouts, right?
Oh, hiring shoutouts. Oh yeah, there you go. Hiring shoutouts. Hivekind is hiring, and if you wanna, if there is a software engineer, Ruby, Rails, that kind of stuff, you can talk to Tristan there if you know anybody. He works at Hivekind. And CoinGecko is also hiring, and they have a ton of positions, not only development, but all sorts of other stuff, including internships. Uh,
Hmm.
so, okay, parking lot, what I talked about. Now this is it. See you all next month.
Bye. See you next month. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
That's it. Thank you. Thank you for hosting.
Sure. Thank you, Tristan. Thank you so much for holding up everything there, man. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, go ahead.
That was a very short talk.
Mm-hmm.
Only streaming.
Well, up to you. I'll end the stream now and then we can talk with Helio.
All right. Sounds good. Bye bye, everybody.